The opinions expressed by Peter Wexler, Robert Quittner, Kyle Plotkin, Michael Hart, Nicholas Hamner, and guests on this show are their own and do not reflect the opinions of this network. All statements and opinions expressed are based upon information considered reliable, although it should not be relied upon as such. Any statements or opinions are subject to change without notice. Investments involve risk and, unless otherwise stated, are not guaranteed. Past performance cannot be used as an indicator to determine future results. Any strategies mentioned may not be suitable for everyone. Information expressed does not take into account your specific situation or objectives and is not intended as recommendations appropriate for you. Before acting on any information mentioned, please consult with a qualified tax or investment advisor to determine if it is suitable for your specific situation. This program is designed to provide accurate and authoritative information with regard to the subjects covered. Investment advisory services offered through Brookstone Capital Management LLC, aka BCM, a registered investment advisor. BCM and Franklin Retirement Solutions are independent of each other. Insurance products and services are not offered through BCM but are offered and sold through individually licensed and appointed agents.
Welcome to this week's Solving the Retirement Puzzle. Glad you could join us. As every week, I am your host, Nick Hamner, and joining me this week, as they have the past few weeks, Michael Hart and Kyle Plotkin. We are all investment advisor reps at Franklin Retirement Solutions, located in Horsham, Pennsylvania. We are financial planners, retirement and income planners. We are here to help you retire and stay retired. And as we do every week, we are going to talk about topical things in the news that apply. And I am going to start off because one of the things I see a lot is clients who want to stay in their homes. They plan to leave foot first. They bought that house. They're going to stay in that house. Don't talk to them about long-term care. Don't talk to them about a retirement community. Their house is their house. It's where they're going to stay. And it's about the hidden dangers in your home. And I'm not talking like you'll see on the news, hidden danger lurking in your home, this silent killer, blah, blah, blah. And it's always something that you've already gotten rid of, like a lead refrigerator or lawn darts, or it's something that you obviously have to misuse for it to be deadly, like like a weed eater or hedge trimmers or something. Like to be careful with a hedge trimmer. Don't go in the pool if you don't know how to swim. That kind of stuff. But no, these are really crazy things. First one is a vegetable or a starch or whatever you want to call it. Any guesses? Deadly starch.
Deadly starch.
Name of your punk band.
It's a good one.
Yeah.
Is it potatoes?
Yes. And just like a punk band, you poke a lot of holes in it. I mean, come on, remember the guys with the safety pins in their nose? It's not a bad reference.
No, it's a timely reference.
It is, 1980s punk. It's 2024? Yeah. Okay.
Get a wallet chain.
But yes, potatoes, a member of the nightshade family. If you eat green potatoes, they'll make you sick. But if you have a bunch of potatoes in a closed space, and I'm not talking about like a bag you leave in the cabinet, bag of a cabinet, you forget about it. I'm talking about like if you have a small sustenance farm and you have 100 pounds, 150 pounds of potatoes, and you put them in your cellar for the winter. If those potatoes go bad, rotten potatoes can emit a gas. Oh, come on. Can emit a gas called solanine, I believe. It can cause you to become lightheaded. It can cause you to faint. And once you faint, if you continue to breathe in those fumes, you could die. And so much so in Russia, a kid was orphaned because her dad went down to the basement, succumbed to the fumes of rotten potatoes. The mom went down to see what happened to the dad. She succumbed. Two other family members went down to see. They succumbed. So this one batch of rotten potatoes knocked out 4 people at once.
How quickly does these potatoes? Is it like carbon monoxide?
I think it must be acting faster than carbon monoxide because carbon monoxide can take a while. But this, for it to act that quickly, it has to be pretty potent in a large quantity. I don't know, but it's not nearly as bad. Well, it is as bad, but it's not nearly as violent as my next one. What item in your home, if it gets a crack in it, can lead to a bloody, really painful death. None?
You got me.
A porcelain toilet. Your porcelain toilet is brittle. It's very hard, but if it ever gets a crack in it, it becomes brittle. So all it takes is a shock, either something hard hitting it like a belt buckle, or you shifting your weight on it. If there's a crack, that crack can weaken the entire structure, and all of a sudden it can burst into sharp, jagged shards, and all your weight is unsupported, and you go down on it. There have been people that will be severely injured and some that have bled out
Hmm.
because of a toilet. And it can be a crack anywhere. It can be a crack at the top of the tank. Maybe you put the lid on a little violently. It could be a crack from where, just the handle going over and over can cause a little crack up there, and that can trigger it. Um, I mean, these are for single piece toilets. Obviously, if you have a multiple piece toilet, the tank is separate from the bowl. If you are not careful, everybody has replaced the wax rings on their toilet at some point. You've got a leak, you pull the toilet up, you replace the rings, you put the bolts back down. If you tighten the bolts too tight, maybe you don't use the washer, crack the tank right there, or crack the bowl right there, and that can just sit there and lurk and wait.
That's something else to worry about. So
It's-
thanks for the anxiety.
Well,
Maybe nightmare fuel, really.
if you were 5, yes, nightmare fuel. Now it's just a
Well,
reason to be careful.
I'm about to. Well, my daughter will be 5.
Yeah.
in not too long a time.
It's
so.
time to show her jaws.
Do you have numbers on how many people are killed by
official number?
toilets?
No. Granted,
Every-
I did not pull this from a super official source. This was a Reddit thread
Right.
where
Gotcha.
people posted like different news links, so it might have been a one-off, but it's still possible because porcelain is brittle. Ceramic is a little tighter than porcelain. It's got different uses, but porcelain is a brittle, fragile thing once it ever gets compromised.
Talk about the Iron Throne.
All right, and nobody likes to see blood on a toilet. Certainly not if you're bleeding out. But there were some other things in there. If you've ever dropped a bag of flour, it makes a cloud of flour dust.
Mm.
If you do that in a tight kitchen and you have a gas stove that is lit, that flour, when it's in the cloud, can ignite. So you could create a fireball in your kitchen just not being careful. They listed all the different tripping hazards, stairs, carpeted stairs, kitchen rugs. If you have a loose rug between your sink and your stove, and you're coming in with a pot of hot water, boiling water, you go into the sink and you slip on that rug, very bad. You slip on that rug with a knife. I mean, all these things that you set down, you forget, you get used to, you don't think about. This could be a problem in the future, which is why I bring it up, because again, so many people live in their homes for a very long time, especially nowadays with the rising costs in real estate. Yeah, you could sell and get a good profit, but you're going to have to pay more to get into anything else, and you'd be the richest poor man in town. And that's one of the many, many things. This is my segue here. Are you ready for the big segue? That's one of the many, many things we consider as part of our retirement and income plans that we work with people. Not just, do you plan to stay in your home? How are you using your home? Are you making the changes you need to make to accommodate your safety, your health? And we even have people here that will go and help you decide where your paintings need to be in your home if you're a big art collector. It's not just about giving you financial figures and watching your stocks. The type of retirement and income planning we do is an all-encompassing lifestyle plan, not just an income plan. And if that's something you ever need, that's why we're here. So give us a call at 215-657-9200 or reach out at info@franklinrs.com. You can see it on the banner here. Had to remember which direction the banner goes.
It's like being a weatherman.
It is. Only no green screen. And not having to care about thunderstorms in Topeka. But that is my bit for the week. So, Kyle, we will jump to you. What have you got?
Stock market. Stock market. So favorite topic, obviously. So one of the things that we'd seen over the past bunch of years with the market. First we had, remember, the FANG stocks, the
Fang, Facebook, Amazon, Alphabet, Netflix, and Google.
that's correct. Yes.
Or Apple,
Apple.
not
Apple.
Alphabet.
Yep. And so that was like driving all the growth in the market for a couple of years there.
Mhm.
And then all of a sudden we had that one bad year, and then it was the Magnificent Seven last year, where there was seven stocks, so kind of that same bunch. Uh,
No
throw,
Netflix. We lost Netflix.
you lost
Brought in
Netflix, but
Nvidia.
you throw in Nvidia, you throw in Tesla and
Mhm.
Microsoft, but same kind of tech area, right?
Mhm.
And so that was driving most of the growth in the stock market last year. I think at one point it was like 75 or 80%
Yeah.
of the growth in the market was in those seven stocks. Well, beginning of this year, the market had spread out the breadth of the market. Uh, and we were seeing a lot more, wider scale growth in a lot of different areas, not just technology. Um, and we thought that, okay, maybe the market's shifting from growth over to value being the lead category. Well, uh, in the month of May,
Mhm.
where the market was pretty good, uh, 75 or more than 75% of the market growth in May was attributed to six stocks.
Now I have a question. In May, with everything going up, did a lot of people sell in May and then go away?
Not in my experience.
No.
No.
Makes our podcast from 2 weeks ago seem
That's
useless
a
now.
it does. It
Yeah.
does. However, um, we look like we might be back to that very narrow tech focused growth area.
Yeah, it's banded up.
Yeah, I mean, we're looking at last month, it was Apple, Google, their Alphabet, Microsoft, Amazon, Meta, and Nvidia. So
Any
basically
cool
six,
acronym there?
not that I found. I'm
Mange.
sure somebody mange.
Yeah.
It's not as cool as Fang.
It's easy to shed though.
Good one. And so basically we're looking at six stocks driving 90 or 75% of the growth, which means that the other 25% of the growth is split between 493 stocks.
Mhm.
Or 492 actually. Google's, or 490, yeah, because Google's got two different kinds of shares that are out there. But
Right.
it's not a whole lot of growth in other areas.
Now, how does that so if you're invested in those single stocks, that's great. What if you're in like an index fund?
Well, an index fund, it's interesting because with an index fund, depending on how it's set up, if you're in, let's say, the SPY, the
Mhm.
S&P 500, which is probably one of the most popular ones, uh, yes, there's 500 stocks in there. However, it is what we call market weighted or
Okay.
market cap weighted. So the bigger a stock in terms of market capitalization, which basically just means how much value is out there in shares of that stock.
Right. So like Apple being a $3 trillion company now.
Nvidia passed it actually.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so there's going to be much more of that. For example, I think at one point Apple was like 6% of the S&P 500, even though it's just one out of those 500 stocks. So tech right now is somewhere around 30% of the market in terms
Mhm.
of cap weight, even though there's not all that many companies in that space. There's a lot of others, other areas where there's a lot more different companies and diversification, yada yada. But basically, even though your fund might be diversified, right? Like
Well, you
it's
think it's diversified.
what you think it is, that they say that it is, technically it is, but 30% of that fund, if it's in the S&P, is
Mhm.
probably going to be in that tech arena, which doesn't even include everything. So like
Right.
Amazon is a consumer discretionary
Mhm.
stock.
Yeah, it's technically like a retailer.
It is, yeah. And there's a couple other ones. Meta uh, is actually in communications.
Mhm.
So it's not straight tech. There's a lot more pieces that go into it, but that just means it spreads it out even more. Like even though these are, tech, they're basically tech firms. They're not in the technology sector, which is already 30%. So you throw in
Right.
these other things, for example, the consumer discretionary sector, I'm sorry, the communication sector, I believe it's like 75% of that is in Amazon or
Yeah.
consumer discretionary. 75% of that whole sector is Amazon. So like, okay, in theory it's diversified, but really it's not so much.
So
So
the moral of the story is if you're using index funds thinking they are diversified, thinking I'm in the S&P, I'm getting 500 companies because of the weighting of it, it's really pretty tightly siloed in
well,
there.
technically you are getting 500 companies, but you're getting vastly different amounts
Yeah.
of those 500 companies. So listen, index funds, they have a purpose. They can be great in some scenarios, but they're not always going to be the end all be all.
Right.
So just again, another thing to look at, another thing to be careful of. And a lot of folks, if you're doing it yourself, conventional wisdom is the S&P 500. That's going to be pretty well diversified, or even like the Russell 2000 or one of these big indexes, the Nasdaq.
Now, again, this is not investing advice. This is not anything you should act upon as a viewer of this. This is something to take into consideration that we are just simply discussing. If you are wanting to make changes to your investment plan, if you're wanting advice, that's something you should take up with an investment professional,
That's
not three
actually
guys on a podcast.
That's exactly actually where I was going with
Yeah.
that, because you may think again, okay, it's diversified. That's what TV told me that this is the way to go, or I read it in the journal or whatever. Um, it may be a good idea to talk to a professional because they're going to know some of these things that are not really quote unquote conventional wisdom.
Yeah, I would say, just to chime in, talk to a professional, and then, it doesn't hurt to have a second set of eyes if you're already working with a professional, to just look over and see how you are invested. I mean, how many times have we looked at, a Morningstar report, a stock intersection report, where a client says, well, I have 10 different mutual funds. So ergo, I'm well diversified, and we run a stock intersection report. And yes, you have 10 different mutual funds or 10 different
And
ETFs.
they're 75% identical.
Exactly. So, to your point, Nick, and that's what we do here. So even if you're already working with somebody, it never hurts to have a second set of eyes.
You got to look at the camera.
To just
If you're making a personal plea, you have to look at the camera as a personal plea. You look at the viewer.
camera
Acknowledge
one
the viewer.
or camera two.
We're not doing the Wayne's World 2 bit. We're not.
No, but if seriously, it doesn't hurt to have a second set of eyes, look over what you have, even if you already are working with somebody. So.
Yep. And so now that you have chimed in finally after just nodding for 15 minutes, you want to do your bit?
Yeah, so I just wanted to talk about sort of being careful to not maximize your 401k contributions early.
I'm glad you put that early bit in there because
Yes.
everybody should be maximizing their 401k as a general rule. Again, as a general rule, not your specific advice. But yeah, so everybody should be maxing their 401k, but you said not
Yeah.
to do it too soon.
Right. So if your plan does not have what's called a true up provision, and only about half the plans out there actually have this true up provision, if you're maxing out your 401k early, you could actually be losing out on some of the company match. So I'll just give an example. So the maximum contribution for 2024, if you're under 50 for the employee, is $23,000. So if we took someone who's making $230,000 a year, just to make the math easy, for them to contribute the maximum throughout the year, it would be 10%. 10% of 230,000 would be 23,000. But let's say we have somebody who, you know, the general rule of thumb, and again, this isn't investment or retirement advice tailored specifically to you, just general, is the general rule of thumb is you want to try to contribute about 15% of your gross towards retirement. Well, if you take that same person who's making $230,000 and they contribute 15% of their gross, assuming that they get paid every 2 weeks, after about 17 paychecks, they will have maxed out their 2024 contribution. And if their employer is matching 5%, when they stop those contributions after those first 17 paychecks, on the next 9 paychecks, the employee will no longer be making a contribution. And as a result, the employer will have no contribution to match. So in the example that I gave, the match that you're missing out on is $442 over 9 paychecks, which comes to just about $3,900 a year that you're missing out on the company match if your plan does not have the true up provision because you maxed out your plan early. And you might say, hey, it's $3,800 or $3,900. It's not a big deal. If you took that $3,900 and you invested it over 15 years, assuming you earned 8%, you're looking at, over $125,000.
Yeah.
So it's considerable money. So it's a situation where you might think, hey, I'm doing the right thing. Like I'm maxing out my plan, ahead of schedule. But something you have to watch out for because you might actually be costing yourself money.
Yeah. So there's more questions on this, and I guess we'll approach it on another episode because we are all running short on time. So we'll make this a quick episode. But the big moral of the story is with your 401k and the true up provision, you got to look deeper. You have to know to go look for that. With the S&P weighting, these index funds and the way they weight, you think you're diversified, they might not be as diversified as you think. You've got to look deeper. When you're living in a home for so long, you've got to look deeper and look at things that you might have just come to accept or ignore, and it could really have a consequence on you. Again, look deeper. Look for those unknown unknowns, as Donald Rumsfeld would have said all those years ago. And that's one of the things we do when we look into client situations. We find all the things they haven't thought about. We have the big long lists of spend categories that they need to budget for. We look into their investments, see if they are redundant, see if they are really as diversified as they think they are, all these things. And so if you have any questions, comments, let us know, 215-657-9200 or info@franklinrs.com. And we look forward to you joining us next week. Again, I am Nick Hamner, Mike, Kyle. We'll see you all here next week. Thank you.